Hey everyone, welcome to our video on biomes. This video should be review for many of you, but maybe not. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually talk about each of the different biomes that exist here on Earth, and we're going to talk about them because Hey everyone, welcome to our video on the different biomes here on Earth. These are some of the main biomes that exist here on Earth. There are some arguments that there might be other biomes, but it just depends on how specifically you're looking at them. But these are the different biomes that we're going to talk about. They are areas that have similar climates and ecosystems, even though they might be spread in different parts of the world. The first one we're going to talk about is the tundra, and you'll notice here we're going to talk about abiotic factors, which are non-living things, plants, and wildlife for each of the different biomes. So the main abiotic factor or non-living thing that exists in the tundra that is most important or notable is permafrost. What that means is the soil is pretty much frozen all year round and it doesn't thaw. There's also strong wind and not too much precipitation like snow going on here. And they do have a very short summer. For plants, you're not going to get any tall trees. It's just too cold and windy for that. So you will have a lot of smaller plants like moss and lichen and very short grass, especially during their summer season. And wildlife is migratory. That means they move in and out of this biome because of the cold. They might have to move south during the harshest parts of the winter. But some of the examples include waterfowl, which is birds and ducks, muskox, Arctic fox, caribou, and lemmings. Next up, let's talk about the taiga. That's a little further south than the tundra, and it's also known sometimes as the boreal forest. It does have long, cold winters, and it does have fairly mild summers compared to the tundra, though. There is some more precipitation going on here, more rain and snow. It's fairly humid compared to the tundra, but the soil doesn't contain a lot of nutrients, so only certain plants can grow there, like conifers and small shrubs. Remember, conifers are like pine trees. Those are going to be cone producing. They are the gymnosperms, if you're thinking back to the plant section. Different wildlife lives here than in the tundra. Some wildlife that lives just in the taiga are lynx, timberwolf, weasels, moose, beavers, and the migratory birds that migrated south from the tundra during the winter. Next up, we've got the temperate forest, and this one you might be most familiar with because we happen to live in a temperate forest area. So if you look at the map, you can see where Virginia is, and we live in a temperate forest. Some of the abiotic or non-living factors here are very cold winters sometimes, but warm summers. It gets pretty warm here. There is year-round precipitation, so we get rain no matter what time of the year it is, no matter what season. And we have very fertile soil. If you go outside, you can see green all around you because we have fertile soil. We have plants like deciduous and coniferous trees, so the ones that have big, broad leaves and the ones with needles. We also have herbs, shrubs, mosses, ferns, many different types of flowers. The wildlife here includes all sorts of things, but some things you may have noticed are deer, black bears, bobcats, raccoons, squirrels, skunks, and many songbirds. If you go outside right now, you could hear a lot of songbirds. It's the season for that. Next up, we're looking at tropical rainforests. This is one of my favorite biomes. I actually was fortunate to be able to go and see one in Belize in Central America, and they are pretty much warm all year. I went in January and I was wearing shorts. They're very wet, there's a lot of rain, and surprisingly, the soil is pretty nutrient poor, but the organisms get their nutrients from other parts of that ecosystem. There are many different plants there. Very tall plants are what the tropical rainforest is famous for. They have broad leaves at the top. You can see the canopy is going to be where the broadest leaves are. And then you've got an understory, which is a little bit lower. And then you have the forest floor. And it's hard for light to actually reach the forest floor because of the broad leaves up top blocking it. But some light does get through, and you have specially adapted plants to actually be able to get light. They actually live attached to the stems and leaves and branches of other trees that are higher up. So they have broadleaf trees, some ferns, some very large vines that climb over the trees. They also have orchids and bromeliads, which are the air plants, and they attach to the trees, trunks, and branches, and they're able to get light by attaching up to the higher parts of the trees. There is so much wildlife in the tropical rainforest. It was hard to even just select a certain amount of tropical rainforest wildlife there, but I wanted to give you some examples. Sloth, tapir, jaguars, you can see in the picture, anteaters, monkeys, there's a toucan, parrots, and many types of insects. There's even piranhas in the rivers and anacondas. Next up, we've got the desert. Desert includes extreme temperature changes. There is very dry soil there. The soil is rich in minerals, but it's not does not have a lot of organic materials like nitrogen there. So it's kind of an interesting soil type, but there are extreme temperature changes. So you might have heard that at nighttime it gets very, very, very cold in the desert, and in the daytime it gets very, very, very hot. The plants are actually very specifically adapted to that high heat. So, cacti and other succulent plants are well adapted to live in the desert because, for example, cacti don't really have true leaves. The needles on a cactus is actually its leaf, which is kind of surprising. But they do have very thick stems so that the xylem and phloem can hold as much nutrients and water as possible for those cacti. So the big green part that you see in a cactus is actually part of its stem. Despite the fact that it's very, very cold at night and very hot during the day, there are a lot of different animals that live there, including mountain lion, gray fox, bobcats, mule deer, pronghorn, which is like a deer type of animal, antelopes, desert sheep, kangaroo rats are shown here. Bats, owls, hawks, ants, beetles, wasps, tortoise, rattlesnakes are famous in the desert, and then lizards. So many types of organisms can live there, but they are very different from organisms that live in other parts of the world because they have to be adapted to the extreme temperature changes. Next up, we've got the grasslands. Abiotic factors or non living things in the grassland include warm summers, seasonal precipitation, which means they have a dry season and a wet season. They have very fertile soil, and sometimes they actually have fires, which go and kind of clear out the grassland and allow for new growth to come. The plants are perennial grasses. That means that they are going to continue living for season after season after season after season. And then herbs that are resistant to drought, fire, and cold. So some of the plants there, even if the periodic fires come and they wipe out a lot of plants, some of the plants can actually survive. Many different types of wildlife live in the grasslands. If you've ever been to kind of like the central part of our country, you might have visited a grassland, but you might have seen coyotes, badgers, pronghorn deer, rabbits, prairie dogs are shown here, cattle, bison, hawks, owls, prairie chickens, snakes, ants, and grasshoppers are also common there. Next up, we've got the savanna. Abiotic factors in the savanna include warm temperatures, seasonal rainfall, just like the grasslands, and frequent fires. So, fairly often they have fires that go through and clear out the savanna for new growth. The savanna, if you've watched The Lion King, is the type of ecosystem biome that is in The Lion King. And what you might have seen from the movie or just from your own research might have been tall perennial grasses, fire resistant trees because of those frequent fires, and shrubs. Wildlife is there's a lot of different types of wildlife in the savanna, but it includes things like lions, leopards, cheetahs, hyenas, jackals, aardvarks, elephants, giraffes, antelope, zebra, baboons, eagles, ostriches, storks, and termites are famous for living in the savanna. So that's a pretty interesting biome. Next up, we've got our water ecosystems and biomes, which are the first one we'll talk about is freshwater. The abiotic factors here are typically flowing or standing still waters or even wetlands like swamps. But this water does not have a lot of salt in it. So anything, if it's a river, it's flowing. If it's standing still, it's like a pond, or wetlands are like a swamp. There are many different types of plants here, but you'll notice they're all adapted to living in a lot of water. So things like moss, cattails you might have seen, or other like grasses around the river. Wildlife includes all types of fish that can exist in freshwater, but catfish is a good example. Turtles, beavers, river otters, frogs, and algae also live here. But basically, anytime where you see rivers and big lakes that are far inland, and even some just like swampland shown in the coastal areas, those are going to be freshwater biomes. And next up, we've got the marine biome. This is salty water. And something that separates marine biome from our freshwater biome is that there are tides in the marine biome. The moon actually pulls on the water and causes tides. You've heard of high tide and low tide if you've gone to the beach. There's different types of plants here. They're adapted to living in the marine environment because of the salt. The kelp is sometimes considered a plant, but it's actually not. It's actually a protist and an algae um, kind of grouped together. It's not a true plant. It's an algae. But a true plant that is in the marine ecosystem is seagrass, and you can see seagrass in the off the coast of Florida, around Belize and Mexico. And you often see turtles and stingrays in that seagrass. The wildlife includes corals, which remember are not a plant, they're an animal. Also, sharks, various types of fish like this anglerfish, whales, sea stars, cnidarians, which are jellyfish, turtles, seabirds, and squid even live there. So if you're looking at the marine biome, there actually are different areas of the marine biome, and you could get more into that if you were to go study marine biology. Thank you so much for listening.